Non-Americans of Reddit. What is something about American that surprised you in a good way? Aloysum333 said. That was my answer too. The landscapes are absolutely awe-inspiring. And such a range of beautiful natural areas from redwood forests to deserts, from prairies to mountains to the Everglades. The stunning beachscapes on the East Coast soothe my soul. Enormous lakes, waterfalls. The natural beauty is profound in the US, and I don't think we from outside hear enough about it. The US culture and politics is so pervasive in other countries, it's all we really hear about, which is a shame. Snodder2 said. Edit. Wow. Thanks for the awards and all the nice replies and comments. To clarify the state abbreviations, I'm leaving them unaltered below. I meant Connecticut, Maine, New Hampshire and New York. We made it as far north as Ogunquit, ME, ate lobsters almost daily, crashed the car in Salem outside Boston, took down a telephone pole too, and on our last day 2 hookers stole my wallet right outside our hotel in New York City. When someone is literally squeezing your balls, you tend to not notice someone else emptying your pockets. It was an awesome trip, nice to relive it through Reddit, but now I feel like actually repeating it. First time in the US, my brother and I, from Norway, went on a road trip around New England and upstate New York. By chance we spent our first night in Mystic, CT, a year or so after the movie Mystic Pizza. It was the night of my 23rd birthday, and we ended up in a small bar full of locals, pretty much the only tourists out-of-towners in the place. During a trip to the bathroom, my brother had told the bartender it was my birthday, and when I came out the entire bar was singing happy birthday to me, and I was served a giant piece of cheesecake. I was completely taken by surprise, and it was a great experience. Most Americans are very friendly to strangers in my experience. We had 3 great weeks in CT, MNNE and NY. On my phone said. On holiday with my family to America, can't remember which part, we visited once a year for 8 years or something. Anyway, I must have been about 8-10 years old, but I dropped my wallet on the ground and carried on walking. Someone behind me flagged me down and gave it back. I remember being surprised they didn't just walk off with it. Maybe they would have if I was an adult. I don't know. I met lots of nice people over there. So that, I guess. Looking at you through social media, Americans seem like the absolute worst, but when I was actually there, everyone was just so super nice. Rustling Levs 1 said. Aussie here. People complain that Americans are too loud, but that can actually sometimes be a good thing. There's been so many times when someone is being annoying in public, but nobody here says anything because we don't want to start a scene. I feel like an American would just tell the annoying person to shut up and actually fix the situation. Charlie Wonka said. I can see why he was so pleasantly surprised. Drive-in movies do exist, but not so common. Bowling alleys exist, very common. Football games exist, and parties do exist, uncommon. Put it all together, it must be memorable. A normal SK teenager's life is to go to school, go home only to set off for lessons such as tutoring or lectures from educational institutions. The day usually ends in a study corral. Students do hang out now and then in between. Popular places are a karaoke room, a room with the audio equipment for karaoke, or some tteokbokki, spicy, sweet red rice cakes, or to chat in a cafe or a PC bang, a place to play games, full of computers. You can order food to eat while playing video games. Dad Sweat Mustache said. This was one of the great joys of my life when I lived in San Francisco. I'm a small-town Midwestern guy and look like it. My roommates were from Detroit, Baltimore, and Oakland. The vast majority of the time we'd go out to an area with tourists. I was constantly stopped and asked for directions and made everyone wait while I drew a little map or something. It was always me they targeted. My friend would say your country bumpkin ass is asking for it, walking around smiling at strangers all day. I loved it. Made me feel useful and like I could have a positive impact on a tourist's view of Americans. Canalafly said. That happened recently. A bunch of us scrounged quarters for a girl to get her clothes dried. I don't know where she was from, but not the US. I oddly have helped a lot of people in the laundromat. This one German dude, in a tiny Oregon town, would not keep his money. I kept telling him it was fine, that laundromats had a complicated card system that tripped up a lot of people. He quickly put a 10 in my bike basket and left. Dream said. How friendly people were, even in big cities like New York City and LA. Although I think my British accent may have been a contributing factor, lol. The situation that sticks out the most was me and my other British friend were standing in line to get into a club in LA making casual small talk with each other when an American lady turned round and was like, "Oh my god, are you girls British? I love your accent." We spoke to her for a bit and she said she knew the DJ so would get us in VIP for free. She was so lovely, but my sketch radar did go off a little. But we accepted her invitation and had a great night and woke up alive the next day. Shiagarath4201 said. It's funny because you can see how much this mob mentality thing is prevalent even with non-US countries. For example, I saw a post that painted the UK in a bad light, and the comments were filled with people saying British people in general are literal trash who don't deserve to have rights. I'm not even exaggerating. Happens all the time with China as well, or really any country that gets attached to bad headlines. People are so quick to throw away any nuance when discussing nations, despite them being made up of millions of unique individuals, many of which almost certainly don't fit whatever stereotype you've got floating around in your head. From studies I've read, it seems like this mentality is basically baked into our neurology as a remnant of our tribal origins, and that you have to actively be aware of this inherent but inaccurate bias to not fall prey to it. Unfortunately, I think the majority of people have very tribalistic mindsets. There's so much genuine hatred for abstract stereotypes. I don't see it as any different than racism. It's the same general principle. Not to say criticisms shouldn't be made, they absolutely should, but there's a big difference between British football culture promotes hooliganism far too much and British people as a whole are human scum. That's just a toxic mentality that ignores the reality of the individual, no matter which country you're applying it to. Slut Club Throwaway said. I am so glad to see the Junior Ranger program mentioned. It's an amazing part of the park service that definitely deserves attention, and yet I find people within the country who have no idea it exists. It's one of the best programs I've seen that gets children involved, and it also gives out sweet badges. Knowledge is everything, and getting future generations understanding ecosystems is definitely an awesome thing. As an aside, in most parks there is no age limit on who can be a Junior Ranger. Go ahead, ask at the desk. Be a 47-year-old Junior Ranger because the badges are sweet and the knowledge is forever. Zero Nephidone Foot said. I live in one of the bigger cities in my area with about 2 hours of a large Canadian city. When the Canadian dollar is strong against the US dollar, we will see a very large influx of Canadians on the weekends. One day outside a very large liquor store here in town, I saw a couple with Manitoba plate get out of their vehicle as I was walking it. I made it in first and was checking specials posted near the entrance. The man walks about 3 feet in the door and just stopped in his tracks. I noticed his eyes pretty much glazed over at the sheer amount and variety of beers, wines, liquor, whiskeys, cordials, and the amounts this place had and the prices. I heard him say, no wonder they're all alcoholics down here. Big Boy I5 said. Asian here, and the thing that surprised me the most when I visited the States, LA and Portland, is the food. My god, it's insane. I'm a pretty big dude. I lift a lot, so naturally I eat a lot as well. Out here I could normally have 2 servings of any meal and I'll be fine. Food in the States, on the other hand, is on an entirely different level. My uncle took me to IHOP once and I could barely finish the food he ordered. I don't even think it was that much. He just got us both a comically large drink and an entree, and that was basically what I ate for the entire day. Bulldog Clip said. Well, I'm from Australia, so I was there purely as a tourist and I didn't have a whole lot of knowledge before turning up. Of course the music side of things is epic, random bars with jazz bands. I found the history fascinating too, half of it is still French. And there's still quite a divide. We did a boat trip up the river and some war stuff. We stayed in the plantation area and that was really interesting. Massive houses from back in the day. We did a walking tour and there's so much interesting history, especially in the cemetery. Epic War Museum if that's your thing. And of course the alligators. We did a propeller boat tour like all good tourists and it was just awesome. Food was great too and just the atmosphere of the streets was really fun. I don't know what it's like to live there though, but on the surface it was very cool. Substantial Freud said. It's actually way more tolerant, accommodating country than mainstream media makes it out to be. American mass media is run by people with a terribly jaundiced, unfairly negative view of America, especially in rural or southern areas. One show tried to play gotcha. They hired two child actors to sit in a restaurant in the Bible Belt and one would tell the other that he thought he might be gay. The producers were hoping for bystanders to overhear it and flip out, but the only reaction was people saying things like "Jesus loves you," ditto when they sent a Muslim, or an actor in Muslim garb, to a NASCAR race. Everyone was really nice to him. Daytona Demon said, "As someone who was born and raised in Europe and then moved to America, it always surprised and annoyed me when European friends complained about the supposed fakeness of Americans saying things like hey, good to see you, and have a great day. I mean, is the opposite preferable? Do these critics yearn for sullen, sour service? I can remember when that sourness was the standard demeanor in the Netherlands, France, the French were probably the worst, Germany. But the continent has come a long way, France included. These days sales clerks and shop owners and waitstaff really are more likely to smile and make an effort to be pleasant. I like to think it's the American influence, but whatever it is, I'll take it over that miserablistic do you want mentality of old." Dinosaur Sheep said, "I'm generalizing from what I've heard from various European friends, it's more that other countries are less initially friendly in comparison to Americans. Not that they're surprised we're not cold. Many other countries are much more reserved in general and only truly open up to people they're very close to. I've heard Americans described as more outwardly friendly to strangers but in a way that isn't fully genuine until you're close to them." Wakanga said, "A couple of years ago my family, Asian, was driving in bumfuck America, which movies and the internet told me was full of racist hicks. At a gas station, I couldn't figure out how to pay by credit card. Gas is not self-service where we live, and couldn't get to work. A middle-aged couple, both obese with the guy having a long beard, got out of their pickup truck which was full of gun stickers and walked up to me as I was getting frustrated with the machine. The first thing that came to my mind was, oh shit, we're gonna be driven out of town. The woman then demonstrated how to pay with the card and when that didn't work, accompanied me inside so I could pay at the cashier. The man struck up a conversation with my dad and gave him tips on the drive, saying the route our GPS was showing was shit and to use another one instead. That day I learned that I was in fact the bigot for judging these people too quickly." One Banana Two Bananas said, "Philanthropy and the idea of paying it forward. Americans have an extremely individualistic society. At the same time, American millionaires are the most generous. The Middle East and Asia are societies that revolve around family and community, but you don't hear of Saudi or Chinese millionaires building funds to encourage millionaire philanthropy, Warren Buffett, or dedicating years of research to building toilets aimed at revolutionizing water sanitation. I've seen latrines contaminate well water and I couldn't be more excited that Bill Gates gives a crap and understands the implications of water, sanitation and hygiene. Going back to the pay-it-forward mentality. On a trip to Goodwill, while I studied in the US, the lady who was standing before me at the register asked the cashier to include the item I'd put on the counter on her bill. I was looking the other way and didn't hear her make a request, so when my turn came to pay, I was informed that the lady who just left the store had already paid for my item. I was dumbfounded. I ran outside to thank my anonymous benefactor, but the lady in question just brushed it off as nothing. "Just pay it forward," she yelled from across the parking lot as she got into her car. That was my first time hearing this phrase. One Banana Two Bananas said, "I later noticed other people doing similar acts of kindness. The father of the girl I was nannying, paying for the order of the next person at the drive-thru, joining Reddit years ago. I remember someone telling a story about a benefactor helping them when their car broke down, and being instructed to pay it forward, or browsing through a sub called Random Acts of Kindness. Back home, we'll occasionally buy lunch or a nice pastry for a homeless person. I've seen my dad contribute to someone's grocery bill when they appeared short on change, but I never once witnessed these random acts of kindness, like you have in the US. People will help those who appear to be in need, but not pay for a random person's meal, coffee, etc., when, for all they know, that stranger could be better off than them. The idea that you're just doing this random act to brighten a stranger's day, knowing that they'll likely return the gesture to another person, and so on and so forth, genuinely amazes me. Edit, thank you for the award. We'll pay it forward." Time's Ugly Stepchild said, "Southern hospitality. Spent some time in Dallas a good few years back now while working. Almost every person I met was so amazingly polite. Being British, we notice this shit. Even when confronted by the Karens and Chads of the world. Couldn't do enough to help people, even when it wasn't their job. Just because it was the right thing to do, the good thing to do. They take that shit seriously there, or did back then anyway. Haven't been back in a while. The railroad said. How people over there literally seem twice as friendly, and how open and vast the land is. Roads are wider, everything green seems vibrant, nice climate. Most homes have a nice style and are huge, also that feeling of being in a country that really values freedom, Bill of Rights etc. It was refreshing. It was also good to see a country that's proud of their country. Flags were to be seen in a lot of places. I also remember seeing fireflies for the first time ever in Central Park. I was like, what was that? Some giant light in the air going on and off out of nowhere. It was cool. What can I say? I enjoyed my 2 weeks there. I miss it and hope to go again one day, hopefully. I'm English, things are pretty different here. Sir Shoresire said. I was in Vegas years ago eating at some shitty restaurant on Fremont, hungover and feeling more abused than the greasy food on my plate. I noticed my fountain drink was off, like the machine hadn't been cleaned in years, so I went to the front and asked for water instead. The woman working there refused and said I'd have to pay another $2.50 for a cup of water. Normally I'd advocate for myself, but I just wasn't feeling it, but I probably looked visibly annoyed. Well, this 6 feet 8 inches, 300 lb plus dude stands up and comes to the counter beside me with his cup and also demands water. He lays into the person working there and starts demanding to see inside the fountain drink machine because it clearly hasn't been cleaned. Says something along the lines of, it's 85 degrees outside and you can't give us water? You want me to come back there and get my own water. Well, we not only got water but bottled water. Thank you, giant stranger. Testy MNB said. Late to the thread, but I want to put this here anyway since I've told so many friends, colleagues when they ask me about the US and what my experience there was like. Spent my sophomore and junior year of HS in Georgia. Of course I know it's not the same everywhere in the US, but the sense of belonging, camaraderie in high school and being on the same team with all the different sports academics programs is something I have never seen or heard of anywhere in Europe. It sounds cheesy, but at my high school this really transcended age groups and cliques and everyone was so supportive of each other's endeavors. LOL. Where I'm from, school was hell. In the US I found an environment so vastly different from what I was used to that it 100% permanently altered my outlook on interacting with strangers and society as a whole. Mangoes Unlimited said. Another as someone who lives in America comment, but here I go. Not only does it actually feel nice to hear something nice about the country I live in, but it helps to expand my worldview. It makes me wonder what the rest of the world is like. Do you guys not start random conversations with others? Just within the past few hours I've had complete strangers talk to me and offer to help me out, at no cost. It's completely normal for me to make casual conversation with people I don't know and will probably never see again. For a long time I've struggled because America didn't have a unique and altogether sense of culture because we're so diverse in a giant country that each region is different. This is so heartwarming to know that something that unites us as a country is our willingness to be friendly and help others. Thank you all for your comments. Obabis said. Spent most of my time in New York and people were really friendly and polite, even though as I understand it for America it is not considered a friendly place. Consumer goods and food was relatively cheap. Also in general I like that you try to make bonds out of everything. High school buddies, army buddies, sports buddies, people from work. Doesn't matter, you try to keep in touch and we'll make a small club out of it. Code for Cake said. The vast beautiful nature with national parks and the journey to get to them. We, European couple, were going for a camping trip starting in SF and visiting all the beautiful sights along the way through Arizona and Nevada. I now get the freedom feeling going for hours in a van and seeing the horizon everywhere. Coming from Germany we have the Autobahn of course, but that's all you see for hours straight, asphalt, cars and trees directly on the sides. Most memorable for me was going from Death Valley with overheating brakes at 40 degrees Celsius to Yosemite in one day with snow on the mountains. Camping was really easy anywhere. We even stayed overnight on Walmart parking lots with other campers and trucks. Might have to do with the sheer massive space you guys have, but that would also never happen in my country. Also the kindness of people, As Europeans we sometimes have the cliché of Americans to fake kindness, but it was really not the case. One time in Yosemite I needed cash for the campsite and there wasn't any working ATM, so the cashier at the nearest gas station offered to just buy a small snack for $100 with card and get the change as cash. That would never happen here. All the NPS rangers were the nicest folks ever. In the big cities it was a mixed bag. We stayed at an Airbnb with a young couple in SF and they came home late at 3 p.m. continuing to party as we tried to sleep in the next room, and they didn't apologize the next day, but that could happen anywhere in the world. Bridgebrard 5731 said, I've only been to New York City and I was overwhelmed by kindness. I had to stop talking because every time my Australian accent was heard someone offered me conversation. Kind conversation, lively conversation. But I was so tired and I just wanted to people watch and take in sights for a day. It sort of made up for the experience of seeing my first real-life gun, not just one gun but armed guards every few steps when I crossed the border from Montreal. 27, had never seen a gun. I felt so very, very small and so alone. So that kindness was beautiful. I would have loved to stay longer but was working. Unsuccessful Plant Mom said, Americans are extremely nice. In England, it's very tribal in that people keep to their own and don't try to be friends with you or nice to people they don't know, while Americans are very open and like Labradors with people. I always found it extremely difficult to make friends in England. People would literally just turn their back on me and ignore me if they didn't know me in social situations, while I've been collected as a friend by multiple extroverted Americans and I genuinely love how warm and kind people are here. They're also very generous with sharing things and the culture seems to reward collectivism and giving to others way more than people portray it as being. I've had several American friends who just buy me gifts because they saw it and it made them think about me, and it's like considered rude if you don't take things they offer, which is the exact opposite of England. Zokidist said, stayed in an Airbnb in Philadelphia. The guy who owned it was Jewish and he was having a party. Sorry for ignorance but I can't remember the name of said gathering. It happened on a Friday though, and he invited us to come along. Everyone who came was a super interesting person, a jazz musician, a guy who made a living off of playing poker, a girl who wrote books, etc. They were all so accommodating and lovely, and for a socially anxious 21-year-old I actually felt so welcomed there. We ate all kinds of different food and sang music from all around the world. It was super cool. Amazing people. Hung in Sarf London said, I drove down the west coast about 17 years ago. A few days and I got a stinking cold and my wife was suffering pregnancy sickness and there was a wild Atlantic storm blowing for days. It was kinda miserable and we got a motel somewhere near Carmel. I walked over to the drugstore and they gave me some decongestant. I got a couple of 40 ounces and a bucket of chicken. When I woke up in the morning the cold was completely gone. So the thing that surprised me was that you could get phenylephrine or some kind of ephedrine over the counter and it really worked. Beer and chicken also helps. Americans really love a posh Queen's English accent, my wife, but are confused by a northern one, me. This would lead to me saying something and people looking confused and asking her what did he say? Followed by a squeal and I just love your accent, say something else.